Greetings, student. This is our instructional video for program number 2. In program number 2, we are going to write a program that accepts the user's name as input, and then we'll greet the user using their name. And of course, this is a form of output by our program. So how do we get input from the user? Well, basically, if you are having an app, you would expect the app to somehow request that information. And we're requesting their name, and someone's name is basically a type of text, right? So we have a command called textInput, and basically if you hover over it and the UI control in the toolbox, it says it creates a text input and assigns it a element ID. Just go ahead and drag it into our program. So text input has two arguments, right? You see this in parentheses, and you see that arguments are separated by commas. The first argument is called a ID. Now ID stands for identifier, or you can think of it as a name, and a text. So what is this text? So let's go ahead and hit the run button and see what it does. And you can see that the word text appears inside the box. This is meant to put instructions for the user. So basically, if you want them to enter their name, we would want to write the word enter your name inside this box. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say, please enter your name, right? And if you run the program now, you'll see that the word please enter your name appears inside the text box. Now, the ID is basically a name that we are going to use to basically get the user's input. So if you see here on the program, if I actually type my name in here, well, how do we get this value back out? Well, we need to give it a name and then use something to get that value out of the text box. So because we're asking for the name, I think it makes sense that we give this text input the name username. Okay, so we're basically giving the actual input a name called user's name or username. Okay. So again, the first argument is the name that we give to the input. The second argument is the text that displays inside the text box. Now, now that we give it a name, let's see if we could actually get the name to appear. So I'm going to use the write command, and I'm just going to write the name of the that we gave the text input, and let's see if it actually appears. Okay, so you can see here that it doesn't understand what I'm doing here, and if I even try to run the program, it's not going to do anything, right? So this doesn't work. Well, we usually put names inside parentheses, right? So let's go ahead and put names inside parentheses and see if this works. You can see that my program writes the literal word username and doesn't even wait for me to type in a name before it prints to the screen. So this brings us to what we need to do. We need a command that waits for the user to type in something and then do something else. And in this case, we're going to wait for the username, and then we want to write the user's name. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, there's a command called onEvent right here. So basically, it executes code at a specific time when it sees a particular event type occur to a user interface element. So text input is a user interface element. It's a text input box. So we need to wait for it in order for us to use the name. So let's go ahead and make and use the onEvent command. So I'm going to delete this for now, or maybe I'll just go ahead and push it down a little bit. I'm going to drag an onEvent command. Let's go ahead and look at the syntax of onEvent. onEvent has 3 arguments. Okay, so again, onEvent is a command that executes another command, basically anything inside these curly braces, whenever a specific event type occurs for the user interface object. So what arguments does it need? It needs to say, well, what command do you want me to do once I'm done waiting? And it needs two arguments to tell me, well, what command am I waiting for? And in this case, it says whenever the ID, basically the name of the user interface element is clicked on, do this. Okay. Well, we don't have something called ID. We have a text input called username. And we don't want to wait for the username to click on it. We want the user to do one of these things. Okay. If you delete both parentheses, you'll actually see the list of commands that every UI element could occur. So in this case, we're waiting for the username to be changed. So when the user changes the username inside the text input, we're going to execute this code. So we're going to now use this. Okay, so we're going to wait for the user to change his name, and then we're going to write the user's name. And let's see if this actually works. So you can see right now that it no longer writes the word username. It's going to wait for me to change the username. So I'm going to change it to Steven. And I'm going to hit enter. And now that I hit enter, the word username appears. Okay, well, now we got the program to wait for me to enter my name. But it doesn't actually write my name. It writes the little text username. So how do we distinguish a text that says the word username and an actual name of a user interface element? Well, when we have a name like this, that's a name of a UI element, and we want to get the text that's associated with it, we use the command called GetText. Okay, so GetText actually gets the text from the user element, and all it requires is that you put in the name of the user element in here, and it will print it. So let's go ahead and drag it into its own line here, and you can see that it accepts an ID, and the ID that we want to get the text from is the username. Okay, but this, all it does is retrieve text. So we didn't tell it to do anything. We just said, oh, this line gives us text. Well, we want to write this. So what we want to do is put a write command around getText. Okay, so getText gets the text from the user interface element, and the write command writes that to the screen. Okay, so I'm going to delete the other write command now because that doesn't do what we want it to do. So now let's go ahead and run our program now. So again, it's going to wait for us to type in our name, and then we hit enter, and look what happens when we hit enter. When we hit enter, we change the user name, so it now executes this code, which is to write whatever the text inside username is, and in this case, Steven. All right, so now what we do now is clean up our program a little bit. We are going to go ahead and fill in the rest of what we wanted to do, which was to greet the user. Okay, so we want to greet the user and say hello to them. So we basically want words to appear before the user's name. So we're going to say something like hi and a little space bar here. So now it's going to say hi, Steven. And let's go ahead and add some text to the back. And now we learned from program number 1 that if we want to add text or combine text, we just use a plus sign. So we're going to put text after the word. Or actually, let me just go ahead and run the program so you guys can see that this works. So I'm going to type in my name now, Mr. Wynn, and hit enter. And look, it says, hi, Mr. Wynn. okay, even though it doesn't have a punctuation. So now we want to say, let's go and add some strings or some text to the back. I want to say, hi, Mr. Wynn, I'm your second program. So we're going to use the plus sign again. We're going to put quotes. So again, this puts a string to the back of the string that we already created. By the way, string is just another word for text. I'm going to add a period because I like punctuation. And I'm going to say, I am your second program, period. And let's go ahead and reset and run our program. So we're going to type in our name now. So type in Mr. Wynn, hit enter, and look what it does. It says, hi, Mr. Wynn, I am your second program. So this is our first program that accepts user input and then outputs it using the user input. Just to recap again, the onEvent command. So the onEvent command is basically a command that waits for something to happen. In this case, when the username gets changed, execute everything to the right of me. So the third argument is basically whatever command you want it to do. It could be one command, it could be multiple commands, but in this case, just one command. The first argument is the name of the user element, the UI element, the user interface element. The second argument is some type of action on the user interface. So either a click, a change, a key press, or a mouse over, so on and so forth. And the third argument, which is basically this entire thing, right? This function with no arguments and these curly braces is basically the command or function you want to execute. Okay? So the onEvent command waits for some action to occur on the user element, and then it's going to execute basically this entire function. Okay? All right, that does it for program number 2.